Hey everybody, it's your boy Snyder1 with Snyder Elite Gaming, bringing you another fantastic video. We kind of set our mini series on the side for a second because Wraith just came out and I gotta do an evaluation on this hero. Now, I'm going to start doing this regularly where the new hero comes out, I'll evaluate him, I'll give him a grade, and basically give you the lowdown, the skinny, the nonchalant, hey, do this kind of video, and hopefully it helps you guys out. So, the first part of this video is going to be a diagnosis. We're going to basically define him. We're going to give him a role or say what kind of roles that he is capable of and which roles to stay away from. Then we're going to diagnose his kit with some math. And we're basically going to give you guys some direction on how to build him. Give you a couple card recommendations on what is good on him, what's not good on him, and basically kind of direct you into some utility cards somewhat. And then after that, we're going to basically talk about team comp. What does it matter what your team comp is? Can you play him every match? Stuff of that nature. And then we're going to end the video with a grade. And that grade is going to be strictly based on competitive play. Is he viable? Is he not viable? And basically see how he stacks up against his peers. That's basically going to be the entire video in a nutshell. If that's the kind of video for you, perfect. If not, well, I'm sorry I couldn't accommodate you. So, the first part of this video is the definition. So, a lot of things that I've been really seeing lately, or at least the definition that's been floating around, is ranged freaking fighter. He's a ranged fighter. He's a ranged fighter. I don't like that definition because fighters are in your face. They're fighting you. They're basically those bruiser type heroes that if you build armor on them can be your front line. Not necessarily tank worthy, but definitely tanky enough to be part of the off tank category. And I don't like that for this character because his health pool is nowhere near there. His durability is trash. So to really say that he's a fighter at a range, it's just too awkward of a definition. I don't like it. So I like the idea of, hey, he's a watered down carry because he's, his potential at auto attacking isn't as great as a carry, but it still packs a wallop if done correctly. Because he still has that carry-ish health pool. He's not as squishy, but he's damn near pretty freaking close. I'll also take watered down caster because he has only one casting ability that does damage, so he's kind of watered down in that sense. But the scaling's pretty good, so I mean you can go with that. But the overall best description you can go with he's a utility. He's a utility character. He's a damage support, maybe. Something around that nature of saying, hey, he doesn't do as much as everybody else, but his kit allows the team to do more than they're capable of doing without him. So basically, that's how I define him. I define him as a watered down carry, watered down caster, utility champion, or even a second support or damage support. Beyond that, I would recommend you playing him. He's definitely fun. He definitely brings some very nice and interesting gameplay to the game. But with that being said, he's definitely a niche player, meaning he's not for every single match. You definitely have to pick your matches wisely. You have to build your team around him, and you really got to be careful getting sucked into your own play. And what I mean by that is you can't be selfish with this character. He is somewhat supporty. And I mean this in the highest respect for him because I love playing him. I've had tremendous success with him, and so have some of my friends. But when played wrong and not keeping the team in mind with a lot of the things that have to do with him, he really starts to hinder the team. He really starts to make it very hard to win because his wave clear is average at best. His damage output is average at best. And if you're not using his utility, he's really a wasted pick. So with that being said, I do want to say that I do like him and I do think that he brings a really nice dynamic. So in order to optimize your guys' ability to really succeed with this champion, the first thing I want to talk about is hero selection. What kind of team do you want to build around here? Now, I went out into the forums, I went onto social media, and I asked the same question to a bunch of people that were streaming, and the one person that stood out in my mind the most was Cameron. He took the time to talk to me, and I pretty much said, hey, what is the ideal scenario for Wraith? Is he viable? What kind of champions do you want to build around him? What is your opinion? And basically what he said is, one, because he doesn't have wave clear, you need to have an alternative for wave clear. That needs to be on your team, or there's just going to be too much pressure and you're never going to be able to push the lanes. So, number one, you need to have some kind of wave clear on your team. And that's not just the carry. It needs to be someone that's pushing like Countess, someone that's pushing like a Gadget, someone that has tremendous force, whether it be Wukong. It's really dependent on how your team wants to make their composition. But it needs wave clear. Second thing, he said you need 2 bursty fighters. And he didn't say which champions, but I could only imagine that he alluded to, Feng Mao, Chimera, Grux, Quang, any combo of those types of characters that can eliminate people off the rewind. That is exactly word for word what Cameron said. You need to be able to eliminate the person off the rewind. So when he sets you up, in order to get an easy kill, you need to be able to delete them right away, and that should be your front line's job. You also need an alternative form of wave clear because he cannot do it himself, because it is, like I said, average at best. So with that being said, that was the team comp advice from one of the top leaderboards, and you really can't do any better than that. So moving on from that, you guys got to look at the damage. So he only has 2 abilities that deal damage. One is his basic attack, and the other is his knock snipe ability, which if built correctly can do a decent amount of damage, but it's not something that is Countess worthy. It's not Howitzer worthy. It's not Chimera worthy. It's nothing like that. It is strictly 100%, somewhere in between a support and a caster's burst. So I tested out 3 different builds. I looked at a burst build, so building power, as much power as I could possibly get on him. I tested a DPS build, so building somewhere along the lines of 50 to 72% crit, and seeing how just his auto attacks mix with his knock and seeing how much damage I could get out of him. And then 100% crit build. So when testing these builds, I went through all the stats and looked at everything, and I came to a couple conclusions. One, basic pin is beautiful on him. It definitely is 100% something that you want in the build, so long as you have enough card power that's not taken away from his damage. It's definitely a luxury, not a necessity. Ability pin, it only nets you 17 damage difference at 40 CP. So really allotting for the amount of ability damage in order to go along with his knock just was not as beneficial as I thought it was going to be. But, if you want 17 more damage, it doesn't make any sense, because you could use that the 10 to 15 CP of pin into something else in order to be more beneficial, like utility cards. And then crit wasn't a bad choice, and in the DPS build, and the 100% crit was surprisingly viable. So you really want to juggle between a burst build of all power or a build that's rocking attack speed, crit, and crit bonus. Now, when comparing the 2 builds side by side, we went 40 CP because everybody tends to get to 40 CP. Rarely have I gotten to late game where I'm 60 card power and it's inhibs versus inhibs. Normally I have pretty short games. So just in case you guys are having short games, I wanted to give you a fair weather build where it's at 40 CP in order to make sure that all the numbers could be comparable, and it's definitely a build that you can get to. Now, at 40 CP, burst build versus DPS build, the burst build initially does very, very, very well. It does more damage out the gate, and it takes 2 autos and in order to catch up in damage. So for an enemy that's fleeing, that has low health, the burst build is definitely the one to go with. So if you're the guy that's roaming the map looking for snipes, you're looking for low enemies, you're looking to get ganks, the burst build is the one for you. But if you're really, grinding out those 1v1 fights versus a guy that has full health, the DPS side towards the 6.5 second mark really, just takes away with it. It does a lot more damage than the burst build, because at that point, when you're using burst, you're using the knock in order to initiate fights, and since it's not a killing blow, you're going to have to wait the 4 seconds for it. Whereas the DPS build is not meant to go off of, your knock. It's going off of your auto attacks, and then you're supplementing knock in between when it comes up. So the DPS build overall on a overall timed event of like 6.5 seconds or greater, the DPS build is going to beat it. And the burst build is really going to start trying to claw its way back, but it just can't sustain the same amount of damage. Now, in comparison to the 100% crit build, that's a different story, because you only lose 1% of your optimal DPS in comparison to the DPS build, but you're always hitting those crits. So it is viable. It does do a little bit more damage than the burst over a period of time, but it doesn't do as much damage as the full-on DPS. So if you're willing to, forego, if you really want to, miss a crit every once in a while, the DPS build is for you. If you don't want to miss a crit and you want to make sure you have the same damage no matter what, 100% crit. If you're that guy that's roaming around and you're ganking and you're really setting up plays for your teammates, the burst build. Now, cards I like to recommend. I'd love to recommend to you Stinger Boost. That thing is amazing, and it just makes your DPS output phenomenal. I want to say that you want to go ahead and grab Tainted Magic, because being able to take percentages of health off of with your knock is beautiful. And that sets up the Stinger Boost, and it's just a never-ending cycle. I run those 2 cards on my build. It is just phenomenal. I love it. I've seen some guys running Ash of the Witch in order to get a slow off that snipe in order to set up the team. That is completely situational. I've seen good things about it, and then I've seen some guys that completely fail with that build. So really, it depends on what other cards you're running with it. If you're running Stinger Boost and then you're running that card, you're really starting to max out how much utility you're getting when you start getting a ward and those 2 cards. So you got to be cognizant of how much utility you're putting on the deck, in order to maximize your damage, because this is a damage dealer. This guy's not going to be rocking a bunch of armor and only be used for his ult in team fights. He is meant to do damage. He is meant to be some kind of ganking force, controlling the mid lane, the buffs, and that kind of things. So, role recommendations. So, according to the dev stream, they designed this character for the mid lane. They wanted him to control buffs, control the lane, control vision, and both sides of the jungle, enemy and ally, and really just wreak havoc. But their number one issue with this entire kit in doing this is he was not able to farm well. His farming was, average at best. So they found it was very easy to transition him into a support role. However, there are a lot of great supports out that do so much more than this character. So putting him in the support role really seems like it takes away more from the team than they have to. So people stuck him in off lane and saw what he could do against 2 people. I don't recommend that either. And the only reason why I say that is because you start running into durability issues. You really can't farm. Like, you could farm under tower with his knock, no problem, because that last hitting is phenomenal. But when you have 2 people pushing the lane so fast with your durability, it's very hard with no escape. And you don't want to be wasting your ult in order to get away from 2 people, because it has a really decent cooldown. So if you're going to play this character, I recommend support or mid lane, but you got to understand what you're giving up. You're giving up your wave clear, and you're giving up a pretty hefty spot to some peers of his. Because right now, Bellica is super strong because she has crowd control and she has wave clear. Same thing with Howitzer. He is super strong right now with his disruption, his CC, his AoE, his wave clear. He's phenomenal. So giving up that in your mid lane, you really, really need to utilize the utility to make it worth it. Now, that is my number one, a tip for this character, is you need to use the utility, and not by yourself, because there's no reason to freaking go invisible by yourself and be a lesser version of Kalari. That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen, heard, and I've seen it often. That is not how this character is supposed to be played. He's a secondary support. He's a damage support. And what that means for you is you need, every time your ult's up, you should be trying to use that on your teammates in order to set up a gank. If you have a Chimera, there's no reason he shouldn't be fed. If you have a carry with a decent phase or a decent support at all, you need to really empower them with your ult. If you see your team fight and you're getting late there and you don't want anybody to die, pop in your ult to get everybody out. You know, it's a phenomenal disengage tool. So you need to use the utility or he's a wasted pick. You need to have that freaking wave clear. You need to have those 2 bruisers that can eliminate people off the rewind. And you need to build him either bursty or DPS. Do not build ability pin. It is not worth it. And don't build too much utility because it's going to take away from his damage ability. And it's really going to start hurting his farm, his ability to gank, and his ability to do anything other than be a support. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and give him a grade, and let's go ahead and get this video over with. So, an S tier character is normally a character that can be placed in any team comp. That is not Wraith. He cannot be placed in any team comp. He is really team dependent and very situational. An A tier character. An A tier character is somewhat dependent on the people that are around him, or he's countered easily, and you really can't choose him into everything. But he's still so top notch that you could play him anyways. Even into a counter pick or even into a bad team comp, you could still play him. He's just not as good as the S. You don't have as many worries as some of the lesser characters, but he's just not quite there. I want to give him an A, but I can't. I just can't because he doesn't do enough damage. You're missing too much out of the team, and your utility, if not used, it just nullifies the whole character. So I can't give him an A. He's definitely a B character. You can't pick him into everything, but he's still a good pick. He's still viable in a lot of situations, especially against teams that are fairly squishy. And when when people are built around him, he definitely makes them better if used correctly. It's very, very user-based. So you got a B character, burst build or a DPS build. 100% crit is okay. Don't build a ability pin. Wave clear, 2 fighters, and you got a utility hero, or AKA the damage support. Well, if you guys like the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out, and it'll put all this nice content at your fingertips. That's all I got for you today. Peace.